Hi, everyone. Last September, the Lord had me reading the book of Ezra and then the book of Nehemiah, and He was showing me the parallel between what was happening then and what is happening now. And He was showing me in this scripture in Ecclesiastes 3:11-15, which says, that which has already been and what is to be has already been, and God requires an account of what is past. Now, I really don't understand what that means. All I kind of know about that is that things kind of keep happening in cycles with God. It's like whatever happened in the past kind of recycles through time, and it kind of is required to happen again. If anybody understands that on a deeper level than that, I would appreciate an explanation. But apparently it's true, because the Lord was showing me how what was happening in Ezra and Nehemiah has happened for us. He gave me a vision one day during my church worship, but I call this one rebuilding the walls. So it starts out with, I saw the city of Babylon. It was a distant blur on the horizon. As I watched Ezra, I was kind of looking down and seeing like this being presented or acted out. And I watched Ezra standing by the river Ahava, preparing to lead the people on their journey back to Jerusalem. Then as I watched, Ezra stood before Cyrus, who was giving the decree for Jerusalem to be built. Now we know that Cyrus was the one who was responsible for signing the decree that set the people free from Babylon so that they could go and rebuild Jerusalem. And that's very relevant if you happen to know who the modern Cyrus is right now. I'm not going to mention any names. So then from seeing Ezra in front of Cyrus, the scene changed to Nehemiah inspecting the gates of Jerusalem. I observed him taking in sight of the broken walls and their shambled state, and his face was displayed with great sorrow. So he was very, crestfallen and heartbroken over the state of the walls. And, if we think about our world today, the walls of our world have been destroyed. Our nation and just the world in general do. So then the scene jumped many, many, many years later, where it was still Jerusalem, but I saw Jesus come down into the middle of Jerusalem. It wasn't his second coming. He was just there in the city. And Jesus appeared inside the rebuilt walls many years later, and his Jerusalem was a complete mess. And I marveled at how he chose to come to the earth in a time when there was so much upheaval. Because a lot of times we think that things should have been in perfect order before he could come, right? But then I understood that people thought that the Messiah was going to come and fix everything, that there would be no more wars or poverty or corruption. They didn't understand that they were going to have to be the ones to fight and rebuild their own generation. It's much like the time we live in. I hear people talk about how things are going to be straightened out in our world. And yes, I believe that things are going to be fixed to a degree, and that we are going to have our day of celebration, just like the people, when they came back to Jerusalem, they had their day of celebration when they were so glad that they were leaving Babylon and they were able to go back and rebuild their city. But they didn't really know the tattered ruins that were there. So as I read through Ezra and Nehemiah, I realized that the challenges they faced were similar to what we are going to face today in trying to rebuild our world. We may have a day of celebration when the evil regime will finally be taken down, but after that, there will be a mess to clean up. And so the Lord was challenging me with that. And he's like, who will be around to provide the answers for the people that have all the questions? It's going to be a mess. It's going to be crazy. Who will people turn to when the celebration ends? So they're going to look to us, and it will be all hands on deck. Every man, woman, and child will be needed to rebuild this world. Because as I was looking through Nehemiah, it just struck me, and it strikes me every time that I read it, that every man, every woman, and every child put their hand in to rebuild those walls. So Jesus said to me at this point, he said, nothing in this world will change like that, meaning where everything is perfect, until the Son of Man comes. In other words, it's going to still be a mess, just like it was when he came to Jerusalem, or when he was in Jerusalem, raised up in Jerusalem. So we're going to have to rebuild and fight for it. And he will need all of us, just like he needed every man, woman, and child to rebuild those walls in Jerusalem. He's going to need every single one of us. We all have a job to do. We all are going to have something that the Lord gives us to do to rebuild his kingdom. So he's going to need you too. He's going to need all of us. So get ready to be used by God